Escapism. Escapism plays a central role in literature written during the Romantic Age. At that time, the industries were booming. More and more industries were being created, which caused humans to forget about nature, something authors did not like. They did not want to write about the reality in the world. Instead, they wanted to flee from their time when writing and travel back in time with their stories. They preferred to pause to the present and how the stories were a long time ago. The sagas of the Romantic Age were mostly about the past, especially medieval culture. Ivanhoe is a novel written by Sir Walter Scott during the Romantic epoch in the 1820s. Ivanhoe took place in the 12th century and is filled with good and evil knights, Saxons and Normans, and an interesting dramatic love triangle. Romanticism is a whole lot about love and emotion, about nature and medieval times. The novel Ivanhoe is filled with love and emotion. A love triangle occurs in the story when the brave and daring Ivanhoe must choose between the beautiful and good Jewish woman Rebecca or the highborn Rowana, who is both fair and beautiful. In the novel, you get to see and visualize in your imagination how beautiful the nature was before the creation of all the industries and factories. The author wants us to witness the nature of big forests, clean water, and air without any pollution. The medieval time was an integral part of the Romantic literature. Ivanhoe is about knights fighting against each other, medieval games with spears and swords, kings and queens, and great kingdoms with their astonishing castles.
One famous author from the Romantic Ages were the British author Mary Shelley, who wrote the famous Gothic novel Frankenstein in the 1800s. The novel is about the protagonist, Victor Frankenstein, who is a scientist that wants to create a human being. He succeeds with this by using electricity, and he created the monster that we all know as Frankenstein. Realizing what he has done, Victor feels guilty for bringing this monster into the world. With fear and disgust lingering in his head, he runs away from this monster and his conscience as well. While the monster wanders the countryside, Victor seeks solace in the tavern near the university where he studies. Victor takes up residence off the coast of Scotland to begin creating a mate for Frankenstein. Although Victor does not uphold his end of the bargain and destroys the project, which causes Frankenstein to seek revenge. After killing Victor's wife, Victor is now the one to seek revenge. In the end, Victor dies and Frankenstein disappears, never to be seen again. You can tell by this novel that it was written in the Romantic Ages because it belongs to the Gothic stream, which were one of the two streams that English literature wrote from. The Gothic stream is about the darker side of life and the human mind. Death is an important part of the Gothic stream, as the authors mostly wrote about it. Everything that is written in the Gothic stream it is, as been said, dark and dull. Frankenstein is written in this way. It portrays the darker side of the human mind, and the environments are mostly dull places. In these two paragraphs, Victor has accomplished his creation and now realizes that it was a mistake. The characteristics from the Gothic stream is very visible in these two paragraphs. The environment that takes place here are not a happy place filled with sunshine. It is in fact the opposite. It is in the middle of a dreary night in November and the rain is hitting hard against the window. Monsters, ruined castles, and bad weather is what the authors from this era wrote about, hence why Frankenstein is a common example of a novel from this stream. Typical devices for the Gothic stream are the supernatural and magical, a gloomy castle, or heroes pursued by a dangerous villain. Frankenstein is portrayed as a dangerous villain who in fact has supernatural powers. Quote, at some distance, advancing towards me with supernatural speed, he bounded over the crevices in the ice among which I had walked with caution. His stature also, as he approached, seemed to exceed that of a man. Like a hero wanting to defeat the villain, Victor wanted to defeat Frankenstein for the reason being the one who brought him to life. The novel does not have the typical hero, the one who rescues everyone. Victor is not a typical hero who is only good and wants to help people, although he understands what had been done the same moment he brought Frankenstein to life and has since regretted it. Victor is not at all the hero that saves the day, but when he dies, he got the monster to disappear, like the hero who saves the day and defeats the villain. Between the ages 1790 and 1837, poetry dominated English literature. Two popular authors and poets in this time period was William Wordsworth and Samuel Coleridge, which is referred to the older generation. In the Romantic era, the writers focused a lot on writing in a language that everybody understood and could relate to, which is probably the reason why poetry became such a huge thing in this time. William Wordsworth and Samuel Coleridge was the two authors who started this. They were seen as the revolutionary in the poetry industry just for setting the starting point for modern poetry. In 1798, they wrote a book together which was given out anonymously that also continued setting directions for the modern poetry. Both Coleridge and Wordsworth often wrote their poems from one specific individual's perspective. They wrote a lot out of own experiences, with a lot explaining emotions. In this era, it was also common to write about nature. All of these three things, emotions, natures, and the way to write out of one person's perspective, are very much shown in the poem I Wander Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. The poem starts, I wander lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. This poem is one of the most famous ones by William Wordsworth, and it represents the Romantic age great because only in the first two sentences it brings up both nature and how it's written out of his perspective. The last part goes, for oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in passive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure feels, and dances with the daffodils. Here we can then see an obvious example of showing emotions in the poems. Both Wordsworth and Coleridge wrote most of their poems unrhymed but still with a clear rhythm to it, called metrical. This you can see if you read Wordsworth's poem. It does not completely rhyme, but it still do have a special rhythm to it, so the unrhymed parts almost go by without you even noticing.
And American literature takes shape. During the beginning of the 1800s, literature was one of the many things that started to grow in America. Autobiographics, non-fictional, and Puritan religious books/poems had been produced during the preceding time in the country. During this period, writers had a big interest in the past, the natural and the individual, or the Gothic stream and its elements of horror, which was one of the most important literary streams during the Romantic age. A lot of writers/poets had started to show up, and some of them had a big influence and impact. Edgar Allan Poe, or also called the Gothic Ghostmaster, had a major figure in the literature world with his short stories, poems, and critical theories. When he got older, he moved to New York, there he worked as a writer and journalist. The most of Poe's work had a Gothic theme. The theme had often a combination with supernatural and magical, violence, blood, fear, and madness. During his time in New York, Poe married his 13-year-old cousin named Virginia Clemm. The marriage did not last long because of the illness his wife suffered from. After a few years, Clemm died. One of Poe's biggest and most famous poems, called The Raven, is about the man who grieves his loving wife Leonore. One day when the man was sitting in his room, a raven appears to his window. The man asks for the bird's name, but the answer he gets is nevermore. The man starts to ask more and more painful and personal questions, but the raven can only answer with one word, nevermore. A little bit from the poem. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee. By this angel he hath sent thee. Respite, respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Leonore. Quaff, oh quaff, this kind nepenthe, and forgot this lost Leonore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. With Poe's obsession with death, violence, and madness, he wanted to show the readers that terror lives in our souls, and with his focus on the emotional details made his work even more horrific. He explored the unconscious and the horror inside the human to approve the darkest side of life and the individual mind. By doing this, Edgar Allan Poe took the Gothic genre to a new level.